Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Sonia, and I'm very excited to welcome all of you to our event today. First, let me give you an introduction about the Migration Summit. The Migration Summit 2022 is organized by the MIT Refugee Action Hub, Namal Karam Foundation, Paper Airplanes, and the MIT Abdul Latif Jamil World Education Lab. The Migration Summit is a month-long global convening designed to build bridges between diverse communities of displaced learners, universities, companies, nonprofits and NGOs, social enterprises, foundations, philanthropists, researchers, policymakers, and governments around the key challenges and opportunities for refugee and migrant communities. This year, we are exploring the theme of education and workforce development in displacement through virtual events like this one, hosted by participating partners around the world. Amy, I'm going to pass it to you now.
Thank you, Sonia. Hey, everyone. Today's session is a design workshop. It's led by Hello Future. It's going to explore a teen student's perspective through obstacles and opportunities. And so the goal of this session is to reveal the hard and soft skills needed, critical and overlooked, required for successful learning and development. So Hello Future was founded in 2016. It's a nonprofit organization that bridges the education gap for adolescent refugees. It transforms the refugee youth experience from forgotten, alone, and stuck to connected and empowered so they can thrive anywhere. I want to welcome today Mohammed Thamer, co-founder of Hello Future and host. And Mohammed, could you tell us a bit about yourself and also welcome?
Thank you, Amy. Actually, just to correct you, I'm the lead and trainer for Hello Future. The co-founder just joined us, Charlie Grosso. I am Mohammed Thamer, based in the Iraqi region of Kurdistan. I am the lead trainer for Hello Future, and I've been working with Hello Future for the past 3 years, specifically in Arbat refugee camp. I had to flee my hometown in 2007 because the situation in Baghdad was dangerous. So I can relate emotionally to the refugee experience, and that gives me a lot of motivation to work with refugees. I'll pass it to Charlie to introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. I'm so sorry for being late. There was a little confusion on where I was supposed to host this. I thought I was hosting it at the MIT campus, and I went there, and anyways, that's not where I was supposed to be. So anyways, I'm back in my hotel room in Boston, and I'm really happy to be with you, and apologies again for being late. So as Lana introduced and Mohammed, our lead trainer, had introduced as well, I am the founder and executive director for Hello Future. We've been working in Iraqi Kurdistan with Syrian refugees since 2016. The objective of this workshop today is to have housekeeping here. Thank you so much. Is for us to go through the design thinking process with a lot of emphasis on the user journey mapping, especially for a cohort that don't get a lot of attention. There's not a ton of programming for teens, and yet they are one of the most critical junctures of their lives, right? Not just in their educational processes, but their overall kind of life trajectory. So for us to just really dive in and understand where they're at, to see how all of us as practitioners can then design better programs, design better interventions, and design better support for them so that they get the support that they need. So that's kind of the objective of these 2 days. So let's do, Mo, have we done intros or?
Sorry, I was muted. Not yet. So I'll start sharing the slides. And
let's just do we're what, like 10 in the room right now, 10, 12 in the room. Why don't we just go around real quick and everybody just do a quick introduction of
Yes, maybe name, location, and work, study, and how do you relate to the refugee crisis? The example I gave was like I had to flee my hometown myself, so that kind of is the way that I relate to the refugee crisis, or I see myself in these refugees that I work with. So something like this, maybe. Anyone wants to start? We can do in the chat, and also like if anyone wants to unmute.
I can jump in, just to introduce myself. I'm Andrea Krantz. I'm actually the board chair of Hello Future. I've been involved for several years, and actually my teenagers and I went and worked in Arbat camp for about a month with Mohammed and Charlie in 2019. I'm also involved on the advisory board of the International Rescue Committee. So really my involvement is just, trying to provide as much support for, as we all know, this growing and increasingly important crisis around the world. So thank you all for joining us.
Hello, everyone. I can continue with the introductions. My name is Camila, and I'm so glad to be here. I work with MIT React as the coordinator for the program in Uruguay, and also handling communications. And yeah, so basically I started working with refugee and migrant related issues when I started working with React, but it has been really a passion and a pleasure just, being able to hear all these stories and being able to work towards building, some solutions that can, solve what a lot of people is facing nowadays. So yeah, here I am.
Thank you, Camila.
Hi, I'm Isabella Rega. I am based in Switzerland, in Geneva. I work for an organization that is called Jesuit Worldwide Learning that offer higher education for refugees in refugee camps, mainly in Kakuma and in Kenya and Dzaleka in Malawi, but also internally displaced people in Iraq, for example. So that's how, and I am, the global research director of that organization. So this is how I relate to the refugees crisis. Thank you for hosting this workshop.
Thank you so much, Isabella.
Hi, my name is Amy Patterson, and I'm based in New York City. I am a director for foundation programs in video game design at Urban Arts in New York City. We're actually based here in New York, but we're around the country right now working to teach students computer science through video game design. So my program, we work with a lot of middle schools and high schools just around the country and bringing in curriculum and programs and merging art and technology in exciting ways. And so we have students from just a wide range of backgrounds. So I was very excited to get involved with this panel and learn a little bit more. Thanks.
That sounds so fun. Thank you so much, Amy.
Hi, my name is Lina Sergiatara, and I'm the CEO and founder of Kerem Foundation. And I'm excited to be here to learn more about Hello Future. And Kerem Foundation is focused on supporting Syrian refugees. And we have a specific program to support innovative education for Syrian refugee teens. Most of our work is done in Turkey in our 2 Kerem houses, one on the Syrian border in southern Turkey in Reyhanli, and the other in Istanbul. And I'm just excited to be here, and thank you so much for hosting this workshop, because I agree with you. It is a forgotten group of people, and it is so critical to support refugee teenagers, because you really can change their lives in a positive intervention at that moment in their life.
Thank you so much for being here, Elena. I've been scoping out Kerem Foundation. I'd love to learn more about your work. It seems super interesting.
Thank you so much.
Am I next?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'm sorry, you have to excuse me. My son is playing rugby today and he asked me to come and he never asked me to come. So I'm Lorraine, I'm the co-founder of NAML and the executive director, one of the co-hosts of the summit. And NAML supports refugees with the skills to work remotely. And I'm really passionate about this session because I always say that the K-12 education system, unless digital skills are taught, by the time they come to us to work with us, for React and NAML, if they don't have the skills, then it's very difficult for us to take them to the next level in terms of employment. So this is really an important juncture, I think, in the lives of refugee teens to have the skills so that they can actually have dignified careers when they finish high school and they move on to higher education. So thanks.
Thank you, Lorraine. So good to have you here.
Thanks. I'll be sort of popping in and out. I'll be home for the end of it. I'm just here for this bit for about an hour or so.
Well, however much time you can give us is greatly appreciated.
I'll be here at the end for sure to close off, but I'll be definitely the last hour and a half. I'll be there.
No worries. How about Sonia? Yes, hi Sonia.
Hi everyone, my name is Sonia. I am a third-year student studying social research and public policy at New York University, Abu Dhabi. So I'm currently based in Abu Dhabi, and my work related to refugee crisis started when I started to intern for NAML. And I'm very excited for the session today to see what we can talk about regarding the skills that children and young teenagers should get, given that they are refugees or displaced individuals and they have like challenges accessing these opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sonia. We're excited to have you here.
I think Jennifer had her hand raised.
Yeah, and I apologize. I'm happy to speak. I just have my camera off because I'm just recovering from a big head cold. So, but yeah, my name is Jennifer. My background is in international education. I've worked a bit with UNESCO and post-conflict, post-disaster education programming, and approaches to education that includes refugees and displaced populations has always been part of my research and interest and sometimes my work experience. So and then also looking at like youth livelihoods and how that interconnects. So happy to be here and engage with you all today.
Lovely to have you here, Jennifer. Thank you so much. I hope you feel a little better.
Thank you.
So Eliza.
Hi everyone. My name is Elsa. I'm a fourth-year student at New York University, Abu Dhabi, and I've worked with migrants and refugees both in the Emirates and in Latvia, and so I also a bit in Syria. So I'm taking the notes for this session, so hopefully I'll be busy.
Thank you for being here. Juan? All right, how about Juan Sebastian? How about Rizani? I'm sorry, I don't know how to say your name correctly.
No worries, it's Razan actually. I'm a student, currently a student at the MIT React. I'm an Eritrean residing in Ethiopia, so I'm happy to pitch in some ideas because I'm a refugee by myself.
You're a refugee from where?
Eritrea.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Same goes
here. Janice?
Sure. My name is Janice Kaye. I'm on the board of a number of companies, and one specifically a fashion company in Soho, where we've launched an initiative to work with women artists and those in the cultural field in Ukraine. And one of the big issues that are coming up is how to engage teens in arts and culture while they are displaced, whether they're displaced within the country or outside the country. And a number of these women are running museums and art galleries in which some are being used for what they're calling social hubs to bring teens and others together to feel
a sense of belonging as well as distraction from what's going on as they lean into arts and culture, perhaps with greater openness and with other resistance that might be in other types of education in the moment.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thanks for being here. Maria, have we heard from you?
Hello, everyone. My name is Maria. I am from Venezuela. Right now, I am a student for the MIT React. I am engineer and I specialize in logistics, and I'm so happy to be here right now.
Thank you so much, Maria. Thanks for being here. And Amy typed in her intro. So Amy Tabor is MIT J. Wells coordinator for the member program. She's especially interested in human skills development in virtual cohort learner spaces. We're excited to have you here, Amy. And I think that is about everyone, right?
Did we hear from Lorraine?
Yes, Lorraine. We heard from Lorraine. And Juan Federico and Juan Sebastian, are both of you, are either of you online? We're gonna say no. Okay, Matabishi.
Yes, I think
who just joined us. Would you like to introduce?
Yes, yes, I can hear. Yes, I'm.
So we're doing an intro just to have give you a context. We are doing an intro, and if you can share with us your name, where are you joining us from, maybe about your work or study, and how do you relate to the refugee crisis?
Okay, fine.
Matabishi, I think you're muted. I'm not sure if we can hear you.
Sorry. Hello.
Hello. Do you want to introduce yourself to it?
Yes, fine. Yeah, I'm Matabishi Narukwako John from Kakuma Refugee Camp. I'm the CEO of Kakuma Vocational Center.
Lovely to have you. Thank you, Matabishi.
Okay, thank you so much.
So it sounds like we have a very experienced cohort of practitioners here with us, both in terms of, I'm gonna bet that most of you are familiar with the design thinking methodology, and then all of you seem to have a good sense of the refugee crisis from any numbers of perspectives from your professional practice. So this is great. This all let us get in a little bit deeper. As you know, the most important process in the design thinking methodology is the empathy space. So what we have is we created, it's hard to design in the abstract, right? So I thought for the sake of this exercise, we were anchored in something very concrete, very real, that Mohammed and I both have a lot of experience and expertise in, and we also have a lot of information to share in how we kind of help us in the insights empathy moment here in our practice. So we have a fact sheet of Iraqi Kurdistan, which Mo will drop in the chat here in a second.
So you should be able to open it in the chat. I just shared the link with you guys.
So take 3 minutes and look over this fact sheet. And then after that, we'll have a virtual reality visual to kind of also anchor us in in the space in which we're going to be designing and learning challenges from. All right. So I trust you all had a chance to look over the fact sheet that was prepared. And then now Mohammed will share a little visual and in the form of virtual reality with you on Arbat refugee camp.
Yes. So we will see some 360 or 180, I think, photos from the refugee camp. These photos were taken from our students. And in this photo, we can see the... Hello, I'm Mohammed. Turn off the audio because, yeah. We can share the link for this later with you if you want to take a look and maybe hear the audio, because we talk about specific things in the audio. So here we can see the camp. It's located outside of Slemani, maybe 30 minutes outside the city of Slemani in northern Iraq. And basically the camp is built of, or the houses in the camp built of concrete walls and metal roofs. So this is an example of a store, for example, in the camp. And as you see, there is this paved road. It's one of two roads that are paved by UNHCR, but the other streets in the camp are not paved, so they are pretty muddy in the winter and dusty in the summer. Here we see a part of the camp that is some refugee families are planting plants and they sell it in the market and then inside the refugee camp. So this is an example of one of these greenhouses. And here's a small shop that has some groceries or homestead. This is how the shops inside the camp mostly look like. And an interesting fact, as time passes, we see more or bigger shops in the camp. So it means that the refugees are kind of settling in the refugee camp, and they are thinking to settle more than going back to their hometowns. Here is an example of a restaurant in the camp, pizza restaurant. And of course, for happy moments like weddings and traditional occasions, there is this salon for women to, they can rent dresses, they can make up their hair. And here, since we're also in Ramadan, here is a mosque where the refugees or the residents of the camp pray. It gets pretty crowded when it's Friday or during Ramadan. And it was closed for some time because of COVID. And this is a PlayStation store that's also located in the camp. So the kids can come in, rent the PlayStation for 30 minutes or an hour. And here we see a barber shop. A lot of teenagers work in barber shops in the camp. I mean, there are maybe 3 around the camp. And this is the only green area in the camp where kids can hang out or families come for picnics. It's a small garden located in the camp. And finally, we have the school. So this is a look at the school from outside. One of the school, because there are 3 schools in the camp. 2 primary schools and 1 secondary and high school. Yes, so this was a little tour around the camp, and I'll pass it to Charlie from here.
Great. How many of us are here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 16. Great. I think we can do 4 groups of 4. So next, we prepared a composite character sketch from a lot of our students. We have 2 character sketches. So 2 groups will take Idris and 2 groups will take Arwa. And then within the groups, you guys will split it up again in halves. So what will happen is, say, Andra and Sonia are gonna try to embody the Arwa archetype based on the information that we do have. And the other 2 in your group will act as interviewers. And then we'll do a little role playing. So the half of the group that is embodying the refugee student archetype will try to answer a series of interview questions from the other half of your teammates to the best of your ability. Again, you can lean back on the fact sheets that was provided. We'll drop the VR link in the chat for you as well, so you have a little bit of visual to go with it. Thank you, Lena. We'll sort it out. And then of course the archetype fact sheet, so that we can kind of do our best to mimic what would be like to interview refugee teens and try to understand their mindset, their challenges, and and how they feel about the obstacles in which they face. All right, Mo will break you guys up in group the best he can.
I'll share the archetypes sheet first. It's in the chat, and Amy will break up the rooms because she's the host.
Okay.
I'm unable to see like breakout rooms bottom from my side. So the link to the sheet is in the chat.
Mo, can you also drop the VR link in there too?
Yes, sure.
And so are we going to be sent to breakout rooms, and then do we just divide amongst ourselves who takes on which role?
Yeah. So we'll put you guys in breakout rooms, and then you guys can decide which one of you want to role play as the refugee teen, and then which one of you guys want to be the interviewees. We'll give you guys probably 25 minutes to really kind of embody and think through the kind of questions that you guys may have, what would be helpful to learn, and we'll come back.
And sorry, one more question, because I like to achieve the proper objective. But the goal of our interview is to find out, like, what are we aiming for at the end of the process in terms of if we're in that role?
We're going to come back and we're going to ask a series of questions that tries to understand both what do we understand in terms of this interview, right? There's some of it I don't want to give away just yet. What do we learn? What do we learn in this interview session with this refugee teen, right? Mohammed and I constructed these archetypes pretty tightly based on our 5 years of experience with our students, both in terms of the amount of information that is shared, the accuracy of the information, as well as their aspirations and their challenges. It's kind of the best substitute without bringing a real student in here.
So we're just supposed to find out as much as we can about them as a person and their experiences and their thoughts.
Absolutely, right. And you are presumably a practitioner who is trying to understand the situation so that you can design a better program to help them on their learning journey.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Amy, are you breaking them out or?
Whoops, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm just verifying how many rooms I should create. I think Camilla said 4.
2, and we
2.
are.
So now we're down to 10, but Lorraine, her battery's dying. So why don't we just do 2 rooms?
Okay.
Why don't we do 2 rooms? And then, so room number 1, say Andrew's room will pretend to be Arwa. And then Isabel's room will be Idris. Does that help, Amy?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to open the rooms and see where we all go. We have 2 rooms.
Okay, great.
Mohammed, Charlie, I'm going to stay here in the main room as tech backup. So in case you want to jump into the breakouts, don't worry because I'm going.
Hello, welcome back. So let's talk a little bit about what that exercise was like, what that kind of archetype embodiment felt. and what some of our challenges were. So let's start with, what did you hear? This question is to the people who acted as interviewers. What did you learn from Arwa in Idris?
Since I took notes, I can go ahead for Arwa. In our exercise, we were getting to know Arwa, who was enacted by Son. And Arwa is a 17-year-old girl from Kobani in Syria, but she has lived for the past 7 years in Suleiman and then in the refugee camp for the past 6 years. And you know, she's from a big family, a family of 6, if I'm not mistaken. And even though she has sort of some aspirations to work in NASA, but she feels this economic sort of financial pressure on her family to get married quite early and perhaps quite soon. And so during the interview process, we talked a lot with Arwa or Sonia about sort of her academic interests. So what does she like in school? And we discovered that she likes natural sciences and particularly physics. And we talked about what are the challenging aspects of her school experience. And she mentioned that, you know, that there are few resources, few teachers who are quite overworked and have to teach multiple subjects. And she also mentioned that she has classmates who have different educational backgrounds, but they have to sort of study in the same environment, which can make it quite challenging for the class to move forward in the same pace. And we also discussed her recreational activities, but she mentioned that most of her time is spent either sort of studying or helping her family, you know, doing what she can to help prepare her siblings. We also discussed in depth her use of YouTube to supplement her educational studies. And we talked about how she found out about YouTube. It was through her teacher using it to teach some content. We talked about what are the challenges, if any, she encounters when studying using YouTube. And she mentioned that her English is not that great and she uses captions in Arabic to understand the material, but sometimes the captions, you know, they're not available for a video, or, you know, she has some internet issues. So because she accesses the content through a laptop in her school library. And lastly, we also discussed, you know, what she does when she has a question that she doesn't understand from the YouTube video. And she mentioned that she would approach her teacher, but since the teachers are quite busy, she's aware of this and therefore sometimes doesn't get an answer. So I think I'll stop here.
That's great. Mo, question to you is yes, or the answer to you is yes. Actually, no. Later. I changed my mind, sorry.
Awesome.
That's great. That is great. With the other group, who would like to share as the interviewer? What did you learn from Idris? What did you hear?
Janice was our interviewer. She dropped off for a moment. Razine was Arwa. Go ahead.
Did no one play Idris?
We were Arwa as well.
Okay, all right, so we have a lot of Arwas here. All right. Yes. Okay, so and Janice dropped off, so let's see. Do you want to give it who did you play, Amy?
I was observer, and then I asked a question to Arwa. So after learning so much about Arwa and her family and her family's perspective of actually marrying and maybe going off with someone, being with someone who she didn't know that well. We switched gears and we were talking more about her interest in space and NASA and what skills and what exactly she likes about the videos. We we talked about maybe her limits in understanding exactly space based on what she's seeing versus other possibilities with like technology and what she can learn in the area of space besides just like, you know, being a captain or an astronaut, and the depth of what she could explore. And then we also talked about expectations from her family versus what she wanted. I think Arwa was rooted in pragmatic, sort of more practical ethos, and was more grounded in, you know, what's realistic, and maybe more conservative in a certain way, and slightly younger seeming, not really realizing more that she could explore. So there was more of a traditional sense of our Arwa versus the other Arwa.
I think both are super valid, right? And in the field we see both, right? What we offered here is a composite, right? And but I love that you guys, the two different groups, were able to tease out a little bit of differences between, right, what's in between the lines in the composite itself, right? Because again, from our experience in the field, both are true and all those elements are present, right? So we heard about Arwa's dreams and aspirations. We heard about a lot of the very kind of practical confines and limitations, right? And some of the workarounds that she's able to try, right? Such as the YouTube search and learning, but then again, she still runs up against certain sets of confines yet again, right? In the language, in the English language itself, in the lack of subtitles or the quality of the subtitles, and right. What did you learn as practitioners listening to her?
I think one of the main takeaways was just this constant tension between the hopes and aspirations and the realities. And so, you know, on the one hand, you know, our slightly more forward-thinking Arwa, you know, had seen things about NASA and was dreaming about that, but then realized that would probably never happen, you know, and she didn't really want to get married so soon, but realized the reality that for financial reasons she probably would. Although thankfully our Arwa felt that her parents would not make her marry somebody that wasn't a good person. So she thought she had a little bit of leeway to find the right match. But I think it was just always this constant thing between what was going well and then the struggles and the realities that might hold her back or that would be restrictive.
Absolutely. Anyone else?
And our Arwa can speak too about how you felt too.
Yes, please, Arwa.
Yes, actually, I wanted to ask if I can talk about it because I found the exercise to be very interesting. And to be honest, I mean, I read the background information about Arwa, and I was trying to put myself in her shoes, but I don't think I will ever be able to understand what Arwa is going through. First of all, because I am coming from a very privileged, I don't know, background. I mean, my parents are fine. They never asked me to marry someone. I have the privilege to study at a very prestigious university. I don't struggle financially. And so I was trying to put myself in her shoes, but it was actually very difficult. And maybe now that I'm thinking, my answers might have been a bit superficial. Somehow I found a story to be very sad, and somehow I wanted to make it sound optimistic, but maybe, I don't know, from the real Arwa, the story wouldn't be like this. So I think it's a very interesting exercise. But I would definitely love to hear this from a real Arwa, and see what the real Arwa has to say about it. But at the same time, it also challenges you and help you to understand a bit better what a refugee or a displaced individual is going through, which is good. But having like both of the stories is really, really important, because if we just assume, then we will never be able to understand exactly what people are going through. Yeah.
Thank you. That was great. What was hard about the interview?
You mean for the interviewers or for playing the role?
For both. I think for both parties, right? For the interviewer, what was challenging about it? And then for those who took on the role as Arwa, what was hard about trying to embody her, right?
I think
yes, Rizani?
Yeah, I just want to give some idea about Arwa. I was Arwa in our group, so it's okay.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, like as a Arwa point of view, like she's young, she's 17, so I don't think she will choose the good output or good idea for her at that age. Like, that's the first problem. Yeah, and the second one, like about the marriage, that's a gamble for her. Like she doesn't know what she's getting into. Like she's just marrying him out of some situation, like money, lack of anything. So that would be a gamble. Like, and the third part, like she should think outside the box. Like instead of hanging out with the people around her, she should go to the web and have some couple of friends and know the reality that's going around her village or city, you can say. So she would have an idea, like instead of going to solve some kind of situation by a marriage, she can solve it by another methods if she searched for it. That's our point.
Great. Thank you for sharing.
No worries.
Anyone else? What was hard about this activity, both as an interviewer in the interview process and as Arwa in you're trying to answer questions? Yes, go ahead, Renezi.
Okay. Like on point of view from Arwa, like the interviewers, they just ask you just the questions, just like when you're applying for a job. They don't ask you about your backgrounds. That could be the main issue. Instead of asking them their nationality, their age, their height, their color, something like that, they should ask them what's the situation they are in or what happened to them. Like to hear them their story, just to listen. I think that would be the first issue.
Okay, so there's a flatness in a real kind of surface level attack in what the interviewers' questions are, right? We don't have a lot of opportunity to get deeper. Sonia?
I think this goes back to my previous answer. So at some point, the interviewees were asking Arwa how did she find out about YouTube? And I think it took me a bit of time to think about it, because again, as a person who's privileged, like I found out about YouTube when I was very young from, I don't know, my parents, or just like by having a laptop back home and I don't know, just finding it. But when I had to put myself in the shoes of Arwa, I had to try to, I don't know, envision her life there in that refugee camp, given her circumstances, and try to come up with a story that could match this difficult access to technology. And there were, I think, a few more questions about that, but yeah, definitely this thing where you have to envision something that you never experienced, and it's not like related to your lifestyle, for example. And then I think it can be overwhelming to have like more people interviewing you. I think if Arwa was interviewed by like 2 or 3 people at the age of 17, I think that could feel very overwhelming for her. At the beginning, at least. I mean, it was a bit overwhelming for me too at the beginning, so.
I'm just taking notes. So
And I think I was going to say, coming at it from the, or did you have a follow-up for Sonia?
Oh, it's okay. I was just gonna, you go ahead.
Oh, what I was going to say from the interviewer perspective, I think we got maybe one level deeper, like we would ask her how she felt about certain things or what was difficult, like socially. But I also felt like you couldn't really go deep, maybe also because it was a group thing. It was the first time we met our Arwa, you know, so you could kind of touch on those issues, but you really couldn't dive deeper into them. I think the other thing that was challenging was when she said she really wanted to study more and go to NASA, but she'd have to get married. Like culturally, it was hard to not try to just say like, no, you don't. Like you can be whatever you want to be. You know, so it's having to have that sort of cultural sensitivity and wanting to encourage her, but not sort of impose your own perspective onto the situation.
Absolutely. Elisa, I say your name wrong, I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's Elsa. No, I just wanted to comment on the fact that as I was thinking about the questions to ask, I think it was easy to ask the questions that would be relevant for me as a practitioner, right? Like, what are the challenges you encounter when you watch YouTube videos, right? So that then I can figure out, you know, what needs to be changed about the learning process. But I think there's another step to be taken to figure out what are the questions that Arwa wants to be asked. Like, I think it goes back to something that Rezene talked about, you know, that the questions sometimes would feel like a job interview and it wouldn't necessarily be sort of interesting for him. And I think that's something that I also tried to think about it. And, you know, I asked about what inspires her, but even that is quite surface level, but just really, and I think that's also why it's good for the practitioner to also sort of put themselves in the shoes of Arwa and think about, okay, what would I want the interview to look like for me? Like, what would I want people to ask about me?
That's a great insight. Thank you, Elsa. Amy?
Yeah, I think I'm repeating what people are saying, but I was very self-conscious as an interviewer that I was projecting myself into the situation and with expectations and predicting how I would answer questions. So I had to continually practice to not do that, and then also just say it out loud to my team, just, you know, sort of like off script. And then Janice was really helpful too, because Janice was challenging us to, who is back, by the way, who was challenging us to think about empowering Arwa in the interview, also not just asking questions, but, you know, how can you, changing the role for Arwa, like, how can you help me think about these questions? So it was just kind of reposing questions in a way where Arwa was more of a helper, someone who's helping, rather than being like questioned or interrogated or something like that.
Absolutely. Janice, we're trying to discuss what was hard about the interview, right? Both as the participants who embodied Arwa, right? And then also as interviewers who were trying to ask Arwa questions, right? How did it feel in this exercise, and what did you guys found to be challenging in that particular role?
Yeah, I mean, it was challenging for me as I have very limited experience, right? So I don't know what can trigger, not trigger. I don't have any of that context at all. So sharing that in the experience I do have with working say 10-year-olds to 20-year-olds in terms of interviewing, which just takes more of a coaching sort of approach, which I found when I asked them how would you help somebody else in this situation? Like, if another 10-year-old, was being bullied because of their LGBTQ, status, like, what would you say to her? And posing it like that, I found opens them up more. So, because it doesn't feel so interrogating. It's not just about them. And then they can create some distance between themselves and their world and some possible outcomes and solutions. But in this context, I don't know if that would work or if that'd be really bad. Like, culturally or any other. So that was my challenge. Like, would this be really bad and triggering to pose it in a way that it would help somebody else, as opposed to being private and directing the conversations to her?
Sure. And I think, so I think you guys have offered a lot of insights, right? Just even in this short little exercise I think in the abstract, right? The limits and the challenges of us as practitioners out doing field interviews, right? There's any numbers of trigger points, cultural sensitivity issues, right? And then you talk about time constraints, right? I need to interview X many people today, right? So then we kind of end up staying on the surface level. The questions gets teed up to, you're not fully listening, right? You're listening for the things you want to hear, right? You're setting them up to answer a certain set of questions to confirm or deny our existing assumptions, right? Versus going out there with no assumptions and just really being participatory, right? But that involves more time, that involves more energy, that involves building trust, right? So maybe these interviews are conducted with fewer participants over a much longer time period, right? Maybe there's a lot more tea had with the family as a whole, right? To not just ask questions, but to observe interactions, right? So that kind of sets us up to do a different type of field work, right? And the hope is that that type of field work will lead us to different aha moments, and then ultimately a different set of solutions, interventions, and programmings for those in which we're trying to create programmings for. The one thing I wanted for us to just kind of think about for a second, because we encounter this in the field all the time ourselves, is that, as Andra said, we were able to kind of get like one level deeper, right? But we can't get a ton deeper, right? There's kind of almost a limit to the answers and the data in which, our interviewees is willing to share with us, right? Why do you guys think that is?
Is there any cultural stigmatization of being more exposed?
Possibly, right? There's no wrong answer, right? Like I have some gut assumptions, but there's no it could be any number of things, right? Who else?
Yeah.
I think it's, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Elsa.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it just seems like a very basic sense of, having your private things and talking to someone who is a stranger to you about your family, what your family wants from you, what do you do at home, even like the things that are your dreams and hopes. I mean, those are very, I think, things that you wouldn't just want to share with anyone. And there's also the aspect, if you don't know the other person, you're not really sure what they're doing with this information, right? Like what is even if they say that it's, to design some sort of, I don't know, to redesign your educational, I don't know, how you're being taught at school, and therefore they need to know how you're learning at home or something like that. I mean, there's just an innate suspicion of that, like if it's not someone who you know.
Right.
Definitely. And if I might add, Elsa, so we see that, and that's definitely valid as we talk with the students and try to, like understand their background, how their life, and how they live with their families. But sometimes even with time, even after we like studying with us for years, it still is hard for them to share and express. So there's that element, of course, but that's maybe part of it. So there's definitely other factors, and anyone else who would like to share other thoughts?
Sonia has her hand up.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the age, because Arwa is not an adult yet, right? So having so many like personal questions asked, I mean, as a person who is not an adult yet, it can be very overwhelming, and it can also be like, it can also be like, maybe you feel that something is wrong, but you cannot tell for sure that maybe, oh, these people asking these questions is actually a violation of my privacy. Maybe you have a feeling about it, but then you're not sure about it because, I don't know, you don't have enough knowledge on that, or you don't feel like you have the authority to stand up for yourself. So maybe like the age and what you know about all these things matter a lot in this situation.
Absolutely, right. So a sense of the lack of authority, right? And I think that this got touched upon, but I want to articulate it in that frequently interviewees, they don't feel like they don't want to disappoint you, right? So they want to tell you what you want to hear, right? Which isn't always an effective methodology at all, right? Because then they're just confirming what you think it is true, right? It leaves a lot of data on the table for us to not discover. Andrea?
Yeah, I was just going to add that in addition to what people have been saying about just the familiarity, like whether you're a refugee or not, when you first meet someone, you typically don't expose your soul to them. But I think that there's also, from the interviewer perspective, a knowledge that there probably was some pretty deep like psychosocial challenges or trauma, or like, very, very significant hardships that these refugees, particularly adolescents, have lived through. And I think you just have this worry that you don't want to be too forceful or do it in the wrong way. Or again, you just met them, like, yes, if they could bare their soul to you, maybe you could develop a more effective response, but it sort of doesn't seem appropriate, especially if that's not like what you were absolutely trained in doing.
Yeah, I mean, the trauma component is huge, right? And as you bring up psychosocial, my gut instinct in having spent a lot of time with our students in the field over the last 7 years and always asking them questions and wanting to know more. And this is, of course, after having spent a lot of time building up a lot of trust values between them, right? Is that I think, so part of it is cultural, part of it is cultural and gendered, right? The culture itself is not one in which feelings are discussed, right? Even less so in the West, right? There's true feelings are just really not accessed at all, right? Unless they're deep traumatic feelings, right? Then it's the dam has broken and we're kind of more in a crisis mode, right? Than a kind of day-to-day mode. So there's the kind of the access of feelings and the lack of encouragement on a cultural context for it. even more so, I think from a girl's perspective, right? I think both girls and boys are just really not, I don't think they give themselves the permission, nor do the culture give them permission to really access and to contemplate the feelings in which they have, right? And the trauma of a displacement father kind of pushes all those things down into the fold as a whole, right? And then the other thing, I think it's also behavioral, right? It's kind of trained. The education system itself does not, Middle Eastern education is a rote memorization methodology, right? The teacher lectures, the students memorize, and then they're tested on it, right? And there's no free write, right? So essay constructs such as like what I did last summer, in which you're basically asked to articulate an answer, right? An articulate answer to an activity in which you did. How did you feel about it? What did you think of it, right? Those constructs don't exist in the education programmatics. And my assumption I'm making here is that that atrophies their muscle in that articulation in conversation with us as interviewers and as practitioners. It's not that they don't know, but the culture prohibits them from expressing it, right? And then the education bars them from practicing that muscle, right? So it's just kind of big and amorphous, and I don't really know how to talk about it in any way that is articulate, right? That offers those bits of insight that will really drive the true ahas for us as practitioners. Right. And Renee also said to share in the chat that sometimes like the interviewees have shame, right? They feel shame in that they had these experiences, that they were displaced, that they experienced trauma. And we see that in our students, right? And even though they rationally understand that the displacement is no fault of their own, but I think the shame comes from the fact that they're not strong, they're not brave, right? They can't just weather all these feelings. They're very legitimate feelings, right? They can't just overcome it, right? So all those things kind of makes our job as interviewees and practitioners and designers very complicated. Lisa.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to ask about because so oftentimes when you're performing a task, such as interviewing someone, right? You have the questions that deal directly with the interview, but then there are the meta questions, which are questions about the interview process itself. And I've found oftentimes in work that actually those meta questions can be very helpful. So in the sense that you ask the person, like, what is difficult about this interview process for you? Or what do you think is inhibiting you from sharing whatever you would like in this interview process? Like, those are not things that people can't answer. And I think they have a pretty good answer for those things. And if they do, so for example, this way, you're not asking them to share something that they don't want. You're just asking them to share why it is that they're not able to share or they don't want to share.
That's a great, that is a great tactic. I like it. Right. And I think that brings us back to something also that was touched upon, is, you know, we talked about it in terms of empowerment, right? How do we empower? Janice talked about how do we empower the interviewee and feel like they're part of the solution, right? So that it's not so much about their experience and their trauma particularly, but right, you're almost tapping into their ingenuity, right? You're tapping into a different part of themselves, right? I think part of the question and the challenge to us as practitioner is how can we set them up as co-creators, right? I think again in the humanitarian aid space, all too often we create a solution and we go out there and there is a pre-existing power dynamic, as Amy had pointed out, right? We're implementing, right? And they are recipient, they're dependent, right? Can we set up a system, right? Can we design programs, right? So that they're co-creators with us, right? And then they're empowered in the processes, right? Both in probably the functional tactical learnings, right? But also in a more meta level, right? Especially as if we're to hold fidelity to the design thinking process, right? As we iterate, right? Oh, Arwa, like we took your advice and we made these changes, right? So the next round looks like this. What do you think, right? Are there those moments that's available to us as designers as we think about solutions? All right. Okay, so let me see where we are. Okay, so let's do a quick, Mo is going to take you through a quick choose your own adventure journey mapping. And then hopefully that will take us to problem definition, how might we statement, and get us a little bit closer to kind of giving shape to our workshop a little bit. So I'm assuming that we're all kind of conceptually familiar with the idea of a choose your own adventure. No. Okay. So Mohammed is walking down the street and he comes to a fork on the road, right? Does he go left or does he go right? Right. If he goes right, what are the implications? He keeps on going down the street. He comes to another fork on the road. Does he go left or right? That's like the most bare bones idea of a choose your own adventure. But Mo is going to walk you through Arwa's choose her own adventure, and we're going to map it out here.
Thank you, Charlie. All right, so I'll share the board with everyone here. And so we can decide each other what Arwa might face and what are the decisions that she might take based on what we learned about her in the interview. So let's have Arwa here. And then, all right. So any suggestion to for a point start, Charlie?
What do you guys think? She's at a crossroads, right? What do you guys think her first set of crossroads should be?
I think a major event in her life would be getting married. So maybe like having these two options to get married soon or somehow to delay the marriage.
Okay, so marriage being one of the forks in the roads, right? And then the other one would be not get married, perhaps?
Yeah.
Right, okay, so she doesn't get married.
Oh, married or no marriage?
Does she continue her education in any one of these choices?
I think for marriage, that can be the second fork. So if she chooses to get married, does she then continue her education or does she not continue her education?
Okay.
Right, so are we gonna go with marriage and then
we're gonna do that as a first fork.
All right, and then education, right?
Right. Do I continue to study? Do I not continue to study? And kind of in line with culture and tradition of the Middle East, unfortunately, that might not be a choice she is empowered to determine. Right. It most likely than not is going to be decided upon by her husband.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And more likely than not, it would be a no, but you never know.
Yes, we could hope that we could hope that her husband and her husband's family is progressive. Right. Rizini, you had your hand up?
Yeah, you already answered it on the marriage part. After the marriage, it's not her choice. Like it should be allowed or disallowed.
Yes.
Like the education.
Right. Okay. So which way would the room like to move in? She gets married and she continues to not study or continues to study? What are the challenges in both sets? Let's speak hypothetically for a second and assume that, you know, her husband says, yes, you can continue to study even after marriage.
We can think of like how would that make her feel, or what would she have as responsibilities, since now she has a family and a house of her own, maybe. So how is she gonna act, and how is she gonna feel?
Like, can I say something?
Please.
Yeah, like when she continues, when her husband allows her to continue education, it's gonna be divided into like her confidence, like to go and pursue the NASA, or if she doesn't have the confidence, she's gonna be blank. You could say that.
I'm not sure I understand you.
Like her confidence to progress in the education way. If she is willing to go forward with it, she's gonna accomplish some courses. If she doesn't have the confidence for it, she's gonna fail. So
Okay.
I could say the confidence.
So I think a question worth investigating would be how might we design programs that help boost students' confidence, right? Some sense of confidence to continue to pursue, right? Or are there moments in a program design that continues to bolster the learner's sense of confidence so that they keep going?
I think another crossroads might be, even if, for example, she chooses, or it is chosen for her not to continue her studies, as in like formal studies, so she no longer goes to school. I think there's an additional choice that she can make whether or not she continues to watch YouTube in her free time. Because I mean, even if she lives at home, I mean, her husband is going to be at work some of the time, or, you know, doing other things. So she will still have some time to watch YouTube on her own. But it might be something that she, without having to go to school, might choose not to pursue any longer.
Okay, so now we're talking about it's more like a self-learner path, right?
So does anyone else agrees or disagrees? So should we go with the not continue to study and figure out the options there? Yes, I see some notes. All right, so let's see what is the other choice. The next choice I was gonna make. So not continue to study, and then we heard from Elsa about her trying to learn online or on YouTube. Let's see what the options can be here.
Wait, but if she's going to learn online, should that not be the continue to study fork?
I think we're talking about like informal education,
Formal,
right? Informal. This is what Elsa, I understood from Elsa, right? Elsa?
Yeah, I mean, I just meant like not even like courses on YouTube, but so for continue and not continue to study, I understood that as schooling, like going, attending school. But then watching YouTube videos, that's okay, that's studying technically, but it's more like, you know, I guess independent, because I think like for here, the way that I understood the continue not to continue studying, it being outside of control would be, you know, if her husband says you're not going to school, you're staying at home, right? And so there's a difference between that, but maybe I'm wrong.
I think for the sake of confusion, right? let's dispense with the differentiation between formal education and informal education. And in that second fork is like, not continue to study means that like she's a homemaker now, right? She's not a she's a homemaker. Continuing study will give her the option of both formal and informal.
All right. So in this case, we continue study. Yeah. Mhm. And then
Can I just add something about like not continuing to study even and still having this opportunity to have this informal education? This could still be an issue because we don't know, since she needs to stay home after she gets married, we don't know for sure whether she's gonna have a laptop or a phone to have access to like internet, and so to be able to watch YouTube. Yeah, that was just a thing that crossed my mind.
Yeah, so I think, again, I think for the just for the sake of clarity for this activity, right? Mo, can you change not continue to study to be homemaker?
oh, okay, housewife. Yes.
Yeah. And we'll just assume that she terminates all learning at that point, formal and informal, right? All right, so she's going to continue to study. Then I think you have both
that becomes formal and informal, no?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Then I think you have a fork of formal and informal here.
All right. And maybe we can take a moment to like think about her life now that she has a house to take care of and is studying, right? So, and then what her choice is going to be in this case.
I mean, for formal, would it be in person versus remote? I don't know if that's a doable thing, but
could be, right?
Because I mean, if she's married, it's probably not going to be far away.
Yeah. Right. So then it becomes a
or it could be full-time versus part-time. There's only so many ways she can go probably at this point.
Absolutely, right. And also in the question of subject matter and accessibility comes to play as well, right? Would she pursue the same, physics, natural science, astrophysics type of courses, engineering type of courses that she would have had? Or would she switch to something a little bit more pragmatic, right? With greater opportunities in a local environment.
That's true. More like vocational versus like university studies.
Yeah, or even like bookkeeping, right? Probably proportionally higher local demand that she can probably piece through a set of courses, right, part-time over 2-3 years and get a certificated program, right? What do you think her challenges are in either scenario? Let's talk about challenges.
External influence.
Okay.
Or maybe it's even more than that. External mandatory, out of her control type influence.
Okay. I'm typing them up in the chats as Mo was trying to figure out his situation. What else? What other external influence is pretty broad. Let's say those are human influences, right? How about time demands? I think internet access is always a good one to make sure we have addressed.
Cost, maybe?
Yeah, cost and hardware. Right. How about lack of roadmap? Roadmap and lack of encouragement.
Yeah. Ongoing support, lack of ongoing support systems.
Yeah, isolation. Right. Social pressure, right? Friends and neighbors, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Why can't you just be happy being a mom? Be a happy housewife to so and so, right? Cost is always a good one. And
Maybe time, because she's got like to
Yeah.
take care of the household and things like that.
Yep, we have time demands. All right. Mentorship. Not being able to reach her full potential is a big one. It is a big one for all the refugee students and youth out there. Thank you, Renee.
Also, something along the lines of representation. So like seeing others in like seeing other people around her in a similar position.
Right. Yes, representation, which kind of goes back to the social dynamics and the overall peer pressure, right? Okay. So Mo, will you add those to under formal education as challenges? What about the challenges that she would face in an informal education setting, right? I think some of these still apply. Right. I think here the lack of roadmap and mentorship especially is probably even more readily up top, right? Because now in an informal setting, how would she even know what she needs to learn?
Would there be two different paths here of with approval, without approval of husband? Is that even a possibility?
We're under the assumption of, in this kind of choose your own adventure trajectory, that the husband agreed to continue study for her.
Got it.
Right, because the housewife is the counter to that, right? He has not agreed to her continuing education.
But there's no path where he doesn't agree and she still wants to continue?
I think it starts to be outlier cases.
Oh, okay.
It starts to be outlier cases, and I think as a mock design thinking challenge, outlier cases won't be that helpful for us to create potential solutions.
Got it.
Right. Solving for outliers is solving for outliers, right?
I feel like the challenges are almost all the same. It's just the priority and importance and difficulties are different depending on if it's formal versus informal. I mean, there might be other challenges, but I feel like these all kind of apply still.
Absolutely. And I think in the informal, the pathway and the mentorship probably bubbles up to the top as to what she would need, right? Whereas the formal schooling, the pathway is a little bit more clear, right? And there's structure, there's at least instructors to provide her with some semblance of mentorship, right? She is still amongst a set of relative peers.
What about certification and recognition in informal? I think that's quite a big challenge of informal education. There's no certification.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point, Lauren. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So Mo, I would put probably certificate under the challenges for informal, and then the need for I would say some sort of like workplace acceptance of that, right? Getting a certificate doesn't mean a lot if other players don't recognize the value in your certification.
I think someone named it job security. Amy, is that what you mean?
Named it what?
Job security.
At this moment, she's not on a path for jobs yet. She's not that far in this journey.
All right. So it's acceptance of lack of
credentials.
Credentialing. Yeah.
Curious, when you say time demands, is that opportunity cost? In other words, if she's doing formal education or even informal education, what is she not doing at that time?
Absolutely. Yeah, for both formal and informal, right? It's time demand cost. Right. And I think
maybe,
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just thinking maybe having problems in staying consistent with like educating herself, because when you do a formal education, you are in a school, and so you have this obligation to attend classes, for example. But when you have this informal education, it can be, there are many distractions happening anyways. So
sure. Motivation.
Motivation, right? Yeah.
It's part of the reason why we see such a high incompletion rates in online learning. Right. Okay. So which one of these? Our next activity is to kind of identify the problem and define it and construct a how might we statement here for our hypothetical ARWA. Which one of these you guys feel more keenly towards? Formal education or informal education?
Sorry, Charlie, what did you say we're going to construct after this?
We're gonna do a concrete problem definition. We're gonna do a concrete problem definition and then construct a how might we statement. How might we solve for X? To kind of get us to the next phase of our design process.
With your experience, where is the majority of people? Do they find themselves needing to consider informal, or is there real access to formal education, so it makes more sense for us to tackle that?
If we're talking, well, let's backtrack here for a second. Hello Future goes down the other path of teens wanting to achieve, right? So we're at a different fork actually altogether.
Okay.
Which is not to say that our students don't end up in early marriages, but usually once they do, they end up in the housewife trajectory. So we really do lose them at that point. This is actually an anomaly, this trajectory that we have marked out here. However, I think the formal and versus informal education challenges are pretty standard, even if we're not this far down the fork.
Got it.
Right. For teens and wanting to tackle one versus the other, right? Even if we just port the whole thing back a couple forks.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah. Okay.
So that's kind of the context of our experience and what we do. But for the sake of the exercise, we're going with it. We're in an outlier situation of, continuing education, right? In a progressive marriage. I think informal education will probably a little bit more, I think informal education is a harder nut to crack.
Okay.
So if the group wants to take on a harder challenge, then I would say, let's go with that one.
I mean, having listened to quite a bit of sessions during this summit, I think sort of digital education, learning online, learning sort of in the circumstances that are available to you, you know, using your phone. It's been quite a theme that has come up time and time again. So maybe I don't know if that speaks to the relevance of it in the field, but just an observation.
It definitely is. There's definitely a lot of the players in this space trying to solve for this, and everybody kind of goes about it a little differently. Laura and we share a very similar philosophical mindset, which we'll get into in the little bit in a later space that gets beyond these kind of first level constraints, which I am sure that Lorraine, I feel like doesn't get talked about enough. So then let's do informal education, right? Let's do informal education and the challenges within it. Let me just look at my notes for a second. All right, so let's articulate the specific problem that we identify from the activity. Okay, so the specific problem is, I would say, Arwa wants to continue her education in an informal manner, right? And here are the challenges in which she faces.
Right, and she's married, right?
And she is married, right? In the outlier component, that is all. She's married, she wants to continue her education. And here are her challenges. All right, what is the impact we want our solution to have?
Well, I think to me, there's there's probably many more, but two things that quickly jump to mind. One is this just for her own sort of sense of self-worth, or is it supposed to end up with actual earning potential in some capacity?
Right.
I think that's a great question.
Yeah.
What do you guys want?
I think if she chooses to continue her education and knowing the list of challenges that she's going to face, I would want our solution to sort of to be like, not, I mean, I don't know if this is the best way to put it, but to be relevant to her, to really like give more meaning to her life, basically, right? So either, you know, she can just study and it really can be for, you know, for her knowledge and so her to enhance her understanding of the world, or it should be something that, you know, she really can use to secure a job or to do something, right? So I feel like in order to define it in negative terms, like I would not want our solution to be something where, you know, she has a degree or she has a diploma or she has something, but then she has gone through all of these challenges and it is of no use to her. I think that would be what I wouldn't want to happen.
Okay, so it sounds like you wanted both, right? Both a self-esteem and self-worth, right? And probably also practical, right? So then wages, right? Economic contribution to the household.
Yeah, it's self-esteem and self-worth over a longer period of time beyond the educational segment. So money, but also feeling self-worth in the job.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna design a solution that is gonna make her feel good and make money. All right, I like it.
And just to play a devil's advocate, because it's something that we face with some of our students as well. I think the most pragmatic thing is to make money, but there's also something we've seen with our adolescents, which is to make change in their communities, which might not necessarily make money, but it can contribute in a way that can be socially perhaps more acceptable. So I don't know if we want to just think about those two pathways or not.
That's a great point, right? There's I don't remember the Arabic Kurdish word off the top of my head right now, but there's a position basically as like the block leader in the camps, right? So what is it, Mo?
Mukhtar.
Mukhtar, right? My understanding is that those positions are traditionally held by men, right? But they're kind of I kind of think of them as like busybodies. Like busybodies with some kind of power and like a social hierarchy, right? They ride higher on the social hierarchy, right? I don't think the job itself or the position itself generates income, right? But it comes with a certain amount of societal communal respectability and influence, right? So I don't know how unlikely it is for a woman to be a mukhtar, right? But in terms of that kind of position, right? Being the person to go to within the community if you have a problem, right? That kind of level of esteem, right? Because social currency is also a currency.
And I was going to say, or it could be, I mean, maybe this is an inappropriate example, but like if you got a first aid certification, like not quite a nurse, but something sort of like that, and maybe you weren't charging, but you were just trying to do a social good.
Yeah, right. That they would go to you for, I mean, it's almost like an old fashioned like midwife, village elder type of position, right? So then I think we're talking about actual economic power. We're talking about social currency, and we're talking about self-esteem, internalized, right? Self-worth, right? And I think they're a little bit of a trifecta in how they line up.
So we have give her a self-esteem.
But if social currency is the third one, is that right, Charlie?
Yeah, social currency is the third one.
Let's see, yes.
Okay, so that is the impact we wish for our solution to have. And then Mo, shall we put this into a how might we statement?
Sure. All right. Let me share slides again and use this template that will help us with the statement. For some reason, my Safari stopped, but we can see the slides still. So here is the template, and the statement starts with how might we dash the action that we want to take in this case for the stakeholder. So maybe how might we help Arwa or refugee teens? And then in order to overcome a current reality, and given that or during a time or a situation, in an ad, and then like give a context. So should we start with how might we build, create a solution, or is it a program? What can it be that we're thinking about? Or more general thing? Any suggestions?
Wait, sorry, Mo, what's the exact question?
Oh, yes. How might we, do you want to start with like how might we build a solution and then we go from there?
So the first box is kind of easy. The first box is asking for an action verb, right? So how might we?
Is that like just continue our education? Oh wait, we're the designers now, we're not the.
Yeah, so we're all designers now. Sorry if that was confusing. We're all designers and practitioners now. So how might we as designers implement, create, design, facilitate? I'm just throwing out action verbs here for you guys. For the first word.
So co-create, you said earlier. So how can we co-create a pathway for her?
Okay, so that's, again, we're deeply ambitious, but I like it, Janice. How might we co-create
An informal educational pathway?
All right, that's more specific, so we can go that. I'll create a.
4, that's box 2 is a stakeholders, right? For how will we frame up ARWA?
For married females who want to get to informal education.
I know.
Even if it's just an informal educational path, then it kind of broadens out maybe a little.
Maybe we could do young married females.
All right, young married females. Young married females, the challenges implied in that. In order to, right? So box number 3 is about current reality.
So we are overcoming the current reality. But
In order to
is this sort of to provide them with additional income, social status, et cetera? Because oftentimes they don't get that. They just stay at home and clean the house or whatever, or are you talking about something different in terms of the reality?
No, you're right. So it's
in order
yeah, because the outcome we want goes into the last box, right? The outcome we want goes in the last box in order to
overcome the challenges, like because we listed the challenges and we want to.
It's almost like we want our solution to exist in parallel of this current reality, right? Within the context of the current reality. Right. So it's how might we co-design an informal education pathway for young married refugees in order to not upset, in order to be complementary to her existing reality, to be complementary to her confines, right, or her existing reality, so that she can increase the kind of the trifecta
self-esteem
desires that we have. Exactly. Yeah.
And actually, really, I was just thinking of something that makes me feel that actually this context is maybe not as unusual, maybe in our particular RBAC camp situation, but if you think about the situation in microfinance in a lot of areas like Africa, or I mean, even in the Middle East as well, it just tends to be with older females who are like already established, had like house, mothers or parents or whatever, but it's actually not that unrealistic.
It's not unrealistic. It's just we work at a place at a different part of the fork on the road. That's all. That's where our work lies. But even outside of the confines of marriage, right? You're talking about young ladies who perhaps like dropped out at 8th grade, 10th grade, right? But still has some desire to learn, but it's also kind of burden sharing the household responsibility with their parents and their younger siblings. Like the informal pathway isn't the stakes in the informal pathway in both challenges and goals are really kind of similar, right? I think the question is how much control do they exert, right? within the confines of them either as single young ladies or married young ladies.
So, all right. We will create.
I can drop in the whole thing in the chat if that's easier for you.
Oh, thank you. I wrote it here and this is copying my notes.
I'll just drop it in the chat. Self-esteem and then comma all the other ones.
Gotcha. Thank you, Elsa.
No problem.
Oops. All right, let's have it here. All right. Oh, I'm sharing the wrong window, I guess. So
Okay.
I wrote yes. Sorry about that. Yeah.
All right.
Mhm.
Okay, so now we have a how might we statement.
Mhm.
All right, we're gonna send you, can we break you guys out into two groups again, Amy? No, I'm sorry, the other, wait, who is Camilla? Camilla.
Yeah, okay, I'm doing that.
Can we break everybody out into two groups?
Yeah, with the same groups.
You can switch it up.
Okay.
Let's switch it up. So we're gonna send you guys back out into breakout rooms, and you'll have about 15 minutes to kind of do a first round of ideation and solution generation.
Okay.
I'm sorry, we're gonna have that question still available for us, or where is it in the chat?
Mo, will you put the how might we back in the chat so they have it?
Oh wait, here it is. Sorry, Elsa did already. Sorry.
Okay, do you want me to open it now?
Yes, please.
Wait, so Charlie, one quick question before I go. So we're just brainstorming options of how to do this?
Yeah.
Like, is there any structure to it, or is it just unstructured?
Open brainstorm session.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Amy, it happened the same. I couldn't assign you to any, so in case you want to join, you can do it yourself, I think.
All right, Mo, I'm gonna run to the restroom real quick, and then I'm gonna come back and we're gonna game out the rest of this. Okay.
All right.
Give me 2 seconds.
Yes.
All right. Mohammed. Welcome back, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome, welcome. So let's hear some of your general brainstorm ideas.
Elsa, did you take good notes again, or do you want
I
someone
can,
else
I
to?
can go ahead. So the first aspect we focused on is the co-creation aspect, because if we're gonna design a pathway that is not just designed by us as the what was the the creators or the sort of the people with the intervention, then we need to identify how are we going to work with these married female refugees. And so there, first of all, we would start with brainstorming the relevant stakeholders, right? So here it would be, of course, identifying the the prospective participants, the females, but then it would also include, for example, their husbands, their neighbors, their family members, so that, because our goal is to have a solution that is complementary to their existing reality. And if we don't talk to the people who might keep them from, gaining this education, that we're not really getting the full picture. So after we talked to the women and after we talked to the community members, we would then move forward to sort of defining our partnership, right? So discussing with the women, how do they want to be involved in this process, right? Do they want to help brainstorm the ideas? Do they want to select the mode in which they're going to learn? Do they want to select sort of the goals that they're going to strive for in their education? So basically identifying kind of what each of us is going to do and where is our responsibility going to lie. And then Janice suggested to do sort of a needs assessment with the sort of stakeholders to understand what is necessary. And then lastly, the last step in our co-creation process would be prioritization, where we sort of would bring everything together and really sort of streamline and define, from talking to the people in the community, from talking to the women who would want to be educated, even though they're married, and so to bring all of this together and then, coming up with a model, how we're going to move forward. And then we move to discuss the informal education pathway, but we realized that since our pathway is going to be informed by the co-creation process that we're going to go through, it was quite difficult to come up with the mode of the education. For example, would it be offline? Would it be would it be online? Would it be face-to-face? Would it how intensive would it be? Because I think all of these aspects would arise from the sort of discussions we would have. So Janice suggested, creating small motivational groups, and we talked about giving access to online resources such as Duolingo, Khan Academy, but all of this would depend on the first aspect that I described. And of course, practical things such as making sure that there's Wi-Fi, technology, community support, daycare for women to leave their children so that they can have like an hour or two even a day to study. And these are no small things. I realize I'm just, stating them as if they're just check and go, but of course, it's not that simple. But then but then we thought if it's such a challenge to define the mode of the pathway, maybe it would be helpful to come up with sort of archetypical pathway outcomes. So if we look at the refugee camp and we see that, okay, well, women don't usually work, or there's little kind of formal employment, but maybe there are sort of positions that women can occupy. Maybe they can work as a translator, and maybe they can do that online, right? So then if we define sort of these outcomes, which would be, okay, here's what you need to do to sort of, become a translator, or here's what you need to do to set up like a small business where you can, I don't know, sell some like handcrafts or anything, or here's how you can become an assistant perhaps at a partner organization. And then that would sort of, first of all, it would deal with some of the challenges with informal education, because we said that there's it lacks like a clear structure or even like motivation. There's you don't know exactly how to move forward, but if we define sort of some of these directions that the women could take, it would sort of deal with those aspects. And that is where the time ended and we were thrown back into the main group.
Okay, well, A, I can tell this is Andrew's room because it's processy heavy. And B, I mean, the process is great, but it sounds like we figured out like what is the next step in generating a solution before we kind of have any sort of solutions.
Right? Well, I think the issue we ran into was the co-creation. So we didn't want to make an assumption because we're like, we don't know what they want. So I think if we had just said create, I think we might have gone down a different path. In my defense.
Co-creation is hard. Co-creation is 100 times harder than a top-down approach, right? And this is also why like majority of us just chooses a top-down approach. This is what I got, right? You like it or you don't like it. And we're gonna like try to solve for minor problems along the way, right? Co-creation is 100% harder, and getting buy-in takes time.
And I think also with co-creation, in a way, you have to build. It's sort of like talking to my son. I'm like, what do you want to do at school? He's like, I don't know. So in a way, you have to tell them, these are the 3 things, and I think you should do this. Because, I mean, my son's a teenager, probably the target age group, but obviously not refugee, but, target age group. And even someone with as much social capital and everything, he can't make a decision. I make the decisions and I'm like, this is what we do. And these are the small decisions you can make within my big decision.
Yes, right. You give him a framework, right? He still has agency, but like within an existing framework in which you laid out, right?
But also, he only has agency if he doesn't choose something stupid. I mean, to be honest.
Agency, there's only so much agency.
Exactly. Because even my oldest son who's 17, I'm like, okay, what do you want to do? He says, well, I want to do this. I'm like, no, that doesn't make sense. You're doing this. So we sort of find a compromise between the two, because at that age, you don't have the experience. And, and sometimes I feel we love the idea of co-creation. And we talk about this, with kids towards education, but often we just don't know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Did your group come up with, how did you guys do in the brainstorm session, Lori?
Well, we sort of cheated and sort of talked about something else, but I do have some ideas. I did think the whole co-creation thing was difficult, because of my experience with teenagers constantly, but also, jumping off what Elsa said, in terms of the type of work that fits around a working female's lifestyle. Remote just gives the flexibility to earn an income whilst working around your schedule and children. So we do feel that that's a really, I'm a big remote advocate, and I think it's a really viable way, because it worked. For example, it worked for me when I was a single parent. So I'm quite an advocate for how can we allow women to have a career whilst, if they don't want to compromise about their children and their families, that's a good balance.
Sure. I think the challenge in remote, right, is motivation, right? It is
Money.
motivation, money, and then how do you foster community, right? I mean, a community and accountability in a not abstracted, but like disconnected way, right? Like school, like traditional school is powerful in the way that like at least kids like being with each other, right? Like there's at least some fun to be had, even if there's not learning to be had, right? So that kind of those kind of secondary add-ons, right? I think remote has a harder time delivering.
I wonder, and I don't know if there's much out there, I'm not as familiar with it, but I wonder if the concept of remote working meeting like microfinance circles could be an interesting sweet spot, in the sense that I know like a lot of microfinance things, it's like a consortium of women in the community that pool their money to go and make money. But like, let's say again, just for the sake of argument, like Elza's example of translators or nursing skills, like what if you had a small group that they could all kind of go through it together? And again, if you're working remote, there's hopefully lots of different opportunities, but then you've got a support network or something like that.
Yeah, so then it starts to sound like a local book club that is tackling a remote learning session together online, right? So then there's both online and offline modules, right? You have the support group offline with your neighbors, but then the instructional components is remote, right?
And even some of the work components, it might just be the support network is in person. And again, it's like not just having to do it all on your own, but somebody you can turn to when you don't understand something or whatever.
Right, absolutely. So tomorrow, we didn't quite get as crisp of a thing as I wanted to, but that's okay. So my desire for tomorrow is for us to come back to you with a set of feedbacks from our archetype Arwa, right? Because design thinking is iterative, right? So our fictional Arwa is gonna come back with feedback for us all in our solution journey, and then give us an opportunity to tinker and iterate and get a little bit deeper in this process. I originally was hoping that we would present Arwa with kind of a high level solution, right? But we kind of don't have that. So it sounds like you guys have more questions for Arwa, which we can also have our fictional Arwa answer for us as well and take us deeper. Yes, Elza.
I just wanted to have give a small comment on I think it's very easy to think of, design process as being iterative, right? You go through, many trial and you could just go through trial and error. But then I don't see why, even when you get to an idea, okay, you developed an idea of how they're going to learn, and then you try it out for a month, and then you realize, okay, it's sort of like, it basically lengthens the design process to like already implementing the solution on like a small scale, which I guess could be thought of as also the design process. But, you don't just sort of spend such a big chunk of time on designing, and then, well, this is final and we're implementing it. But you lessen the design process a little bit, and you say, okay, well, this is what we're going to implement it on a small scale, for a month or two, and then we're going to come back again and see how it works.
Absolutely. I mean, that's how that intention, right, of a quick prototype in the field, you test the prototype, you get data from the prototype, and then you come back and reiterate, is very much so how IDEO and the big practitioners kind of roll out these methodologies. Right, time is a luxury, so I think it just really depends on how much luxury we can afford in the process itself. What I can say for Hello Future, so we teach our students this design thinking methodology. A lot of the handouts that you see here are actually what we share with our students in our class. And we work with teenagers, so 14 to 18 years old. The practice has many kind of intended components, but I would say the overall reaching desire is for us to move them from dependency into agency, right? Because they're set up to be co-creators. They're empowered to generate solutions for their community rather than, again, this top-down methodology of like, Charlie knows best and Charlie's going to tell you what the thing is to do, right? We kind of set ourselves up a little differently in more as facilitators of here's a framework. We can teach you the framework. We can help you troubleshoot along this framework, but the insights are yours because you know your community best, right? The solutions are yours because I believe you have the ingenuity, right? Because you have the insights that I don't have, right? To come up with what needs to get implemented. So anyways, that's just a little insight into our work as a whole. So what questions would you guys like to ask Arwa? What do you guys want to know from her? So we're going to put her on this informal learning path.
I mean, I guess if I'm particularly using Arwa as my stakeholder, not a group of people, since I know she's interested sort of in the science areas, I'd probably want to ask her, are there jobs or areas of work that, you know, maybe not NASA, but that she's seen in the community or she knows about that she thinks could be helpful in her community?
Okay. Yeah. So what are some of the adjacencies that's reachable?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Sorry, I shouldn't have typed that long. But I think one of the things that was missing is the training that you mentioned, Charlie, the training of the actual co-creators, you know, to, you know, the ones who are running it, to have some sort of facilitator coaching skills. So that can come up with, so the team in itself generate the outcomes, ideas, the thoughts that they might not have had with a direct questioning type of approach.
For sure, right? I think I can already see challenges in it, but that's not a bad thing, right? But because it's an opportunity, right? It's a signal for opportunity for us. So I think, Mo, a good question for Arwa is receptivity to like kind of the co-creation idea, right? What are some anticipated challenges as co-creators and as facilitators, right? Yeah, what else would we like to know from Arwa so we can kind of help design this informal learning journey for her and her cohorts of all the young ladies that are.
Maybe who she thinks in the community would be the most helpful and who might be the biggest barrier or present the biggest barrier.
Yeah, advocates and detractors.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're trying to design this sort of head on, then I think it would be important to understand how would she like to learn? You know, would she like to learn through, you know, using sort of pre-made online courses? Would she like to learn in a group of, you know, other females that are in a similar position?
Yeah, right. What are the challenges to the gathering itself, right? Do they have a space to gather?
Yeah, I think in general, the constraints, like it could be, do you have Wi-Fi? If she doesn't have Wi-Fi, then obviously that's something that would have to be solved.
Yeah.
And how much time they are willing to commit to this kind of program? Like how often?
Yeah, kind of relevant, right? I think something good to ask her, but probably challenging for her to think about is what are the motivations now? Right? How do we motivate you? And then how do you like to be held accountable?
Yeah. can you envision yourself in the new reality called married? And how do you self-motivate in that new world?
Exactly, right. As designer, I would say, how can we understand the social dynamics better so that we set up positive reinforcements for you within the social dynamic and within that social construct.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe stars on a chart wouldn't be so bad. What did it mean?
Right. Which again, I think that's going to go back to advocates and detractors, right? Who do you need in your corner as advocates, right? Anything else we would like to ask Arwa, so then she can bring us new insights for our work tomorrow.
I mean, I guess we had multiple objectives, maybe her prioritization of those.
That's a great one. Yeah. What matters more to you in this activity? Okay. Anything else? All right.
All your questions are noted.
Great. Well, it's a pretty comprehensive list. I'm really excited to see what Arwa has to say. So thank you all so much for being with us today and for your participation. I hope it's been fun and informative, and we look forward to reconvening with you all tomorrow, and we'll get in a little bit deeper here with our fictional archetype, and probably hopefully get to a interesting solve at the end of tomorrow.
Thank you, everyone. Looking forward to see you tomorrow again.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Today. So thank you, Charlie. Thank you, team. And yeah, have a good day, evening, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Lorraine.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.